Let's bring on the panel now, and joining me on the desk is Amanda Rose from Small Business Women Australia and Caleb Don, Caleb Don, the Don of the newsroom. Caleb Bond, co-host of The Late Debate, and joining us from elsewhere in Sydney is Nick Cater from the Menzies Research Centre and The Australian. Hey, let's start off on this rally. I can't believe that there's so many communities facing so much pain and they're ignored by the big city media. Nick, you were there. You're one of the few people who saw this. How can the media, especially the ABC that's supposed to care about regional Australia, how can they just ignore this?
It doesn't fit the narrative, does it, Chris? And the idea that renewables, there may be actually a cost attached to renewables, you know, a financial cost, obviously, but a cost in terms of the landscape, our natural, our wildlife, our biodiversity. They just won't take that in and prefer to ignore it. So, you know, like you, I've been out to some of these communities and they haven't seen a single mainstream journalist. You know, the only places I go to, they've seen a journalist, it's you. And, you know, so this is the great untold scandal that we need to uncover here. And you're right, there are so many communities. In fact, we sat down this afternoon and tried to count them up. We just don't know because this thing is so widespread. There are communities up and down the country fighting their own lonely battles, and today they came together to make a big noise in Sydney.
Yeah, well, Barnaby Joyce was there, the most senior politician, and he spoke to Andrew Bolt about it earlier. He'll keep it going. But these people are going to go to Canberra, so they'll keep trying to get attention. But, Amanda, they must be heartbroken because they figure they're being ignored in their regions. Well, we'll come to the city, a whole range of communities. They won't be able to ignore us now. And guess what? The big city media said, we don't care about you.
Isn't that interesting and really, really sad? I wonder if people know where their food comes from.
Yeah.
I'm quite surprised that they're enjoying their dinner, watching the hype of other stories on TV, eating what these farmers are providing. So if they start closing down, which they are, and there are stories of farmers actually shooting their herd because they get such minimal money for it. So they're fighting it from all angles. And now they're trying to fight the renewable energy hype, and then, they're obviously the large companies are not paying them what they're worth for the beef and so forth, and they're going to fall apart. And these are families' livelihoods, but also it's our food. It's our food source, and people need to know that.
All sorts of people there today, and thanks to all those who came up and said g'day. I really appreciate it. It was great to meet these people, but they're going to be heartbroken, Caleb, and it's unfair, but these issues won't go away as long as the people keep up their persistence. And Labor's going to have to deal with this, right? They can't just have a bun fight in every community in regional Australia over either a solar farm or a transmission line.
No, and people in the regions and rural Australia often get a raw deal, not only from federal government but state government, because it's like, oh, well, the majority of people are in the cities, so that's who we're going to pander to. The only problem is that without rural and regional Australians, this country stops.
Exactly.
Now, it's a little bit before my time, but many viewers would remember back in the 80s there was a massive truck blockade in Sydney because the taxes that were being put upon truck drivers made it totally impossible for independent operators to do their job. And so they just all pulled up stumps on the side of the highway and said, well, your food's not going to be delivered. Your goods aren't going to be delivered. What are you going to do about it? And they achieved something. And the great power that people in rural and regional Australia have is that they provide our food, they provide all the things we need to survive. And if they say tomorrow, well, we're going to up stumps and go on strike, this country is going to be in a great deal of trouble. So that would be my advice to them. Go on strike and see how the government likes it.
We'll be forced into veganism.
We will all pay the price.
Yeah, and honestly, there's so many different people there with different stories about different projects, but they all share this sense of frustration. No one's listening to us. And the fact that this is being dumped on them. Inner city people voting Teal and whatever are pushing this on them, and they're having to carry the can. There are no wind turbines going up on South Head or North Head or along Brighton Beach in Melbourne.
And what we've got, Nick, I mean, Nick did great work earlier in the year getting vision of these decommissioned wind turbines that have just been sort of left in the middle of the bush. I mean, this is the great environmental scam. How great they are. We put them up full of these metals we've got to dig out of the ground, and then when we get rid of them, we blow them out with a stick of dynamite and either bury them in the ground or leave them on top of the ground. How great for the environment.
Yeah, Nick, one of the women at the protest today was talking to me about this. We didn't include it in the package, but she was worried about those blades and as they start to deteriorate, shedding material into the waterways and the like.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a good point that we made about the woke in the inner city driving this. I spoke to a guy today. He's going to have high voltage transmission lines come right through the middle of his farm, over his house, and he's going to have to move his farm operation. This guy's off the grid. He has gone off the grid. So none of this will benefit him at all, but he has to put up with this tremendous inconvenience to satisfy the vanity of people in Wentworth. I find this absolutely unjust, Chris. It just really, it's something wrong about this.
It really is unjust, and that's why I wanted to make the effort to get there today. But I even as old and cynical as I am now, experienced in media and politics, I was gutted and shocked to see that there was just no media there. I thought 7 and 9 and the ABC might give it minimal coverage, but some coverage. They've just ignored their fellow Australians, ignored it because it doesn't suit their ideological agenda. They'll cover someone else gluing themselves to a steering wheel or something instead. Look, while this was happening in Sydney, the federal Labor government that should be doing something about this, well, they were just involved in muckraking, trying to portray Peter Dutton as a protector of pedophiles. It was just an implausible claim that just won't fly. Dutton, unsurprisingly, is calling for an apology. But Labor keep going on with this stuff. Have a look at how some of it unfolded today.
On Monday, Speaker, we saw the opposition, led by the Leader of the Opposition, come into the chamber and vote to protect pedophiles over children. That's what they did.
Anika Wells. And I think we've got Anika Wells here from this morning.
The Home Affairs Minister has accused Peter Dutton of being a protector of pedophiles. Do you agree with that?
Yes, and not only that, but this whole mess that we're facing and trying to clean up now didn't start a couple of weeks ago when the High Court decision was handed down. It started a couple of years ago when Peter Dutton was the minister responsible and made a decision to allow NZYQ to apply for a visa instead of deporting him.
Blah, 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 blah. I'm just staggered by that, Amanda. Such a despicable claim, obviously nonsense. And she said, yeah, I'm all on that because guess what? They're my team and I have to back in this outrageous slur.
I feel like every time I'm sitting here, I'm talking about the lack of accountability when it comes to politicians. And it's like, well, no. He did it. And I feel like I'm in a schoolyard. But she did that 2 years ago, so it's their fault. And this, instead of actually, this is the situation. We should have been on top of it. We're going to fix it. And moving forward, we are going to be the leaders and do this. The second you attack someone or throw someone under the bus for something you should have been aware of, instantly your credibility goes and your leadership character's gone.
Just incredible. Now, I said last night on this very program, Caleb, that they've always portrayed Peter Dutton as the hard man who's unelectable because he's so hard. They've suddenly realised that's a hell of a strength compared to their weakness. So they're just trying to tear him down with outrageous slurs.
Well, he's gone from the bloke who wants everyone out of the country to the bloke who wants to keep all these people in the country. I mean, can you imagine the strategists who were sitting around in the Labor meeting having their coffee in the morning, bit hungover, and they're like, OK, how are we going to get Dutton here? I know, we're going to call him a paedophile protector. That'll really work, right? I mean, this NZYQ, whatever the name was that the High Court gave him, he's stateless. Yeah. Where were we meant to deport him to?
Can't deport him anywhere.
He's not a citizen of anywhere, so we couldn't actually send him anywhere. And as the government well knows, because they tried to get him out of the country to avoid all of this hoo-ha, they couldn't do it. No one else wanted to take him. So where was Peter Dutton meant to send him?
But Peter Dutton kept him in detention.
Exactly.
I think this is a distraction technique because they've put so many pieces of legislation forward in the last week in Parliament, including the Digital Identity Bill, and they don't want anyone looking at that or questioning that. So this is a huge distraction.
Oh, no, I think this is priority number one is national security, surely. And I think your point about them going the pedophile attack, they say that under parliamentary privilege, right? They can say whatever they like. Anika Wells is stupid enough to say it outside Parliament. She must be sort of nervously waiting for a letter from Peter Dutton's lawyers now. But Nick, the other point here, talking about it, the case that brought all this to a head through the High Court, NZYQ or whatever, He came in on a boat under Labor. He was part of Labor's weak borders. And guess what? The whole time the coalition was in government, he remained in detention. He's out. Sure, according to a High Court decision, but a High Court decision that the Labor government completely stuffed because they told the court, we don't think we can ever deport him. They never should have made that concession.
That's right, but I think the public are onto this, Chris. You know, they know that Peter Dutton has really been leading the country in essence for the past fortnight because he's the only one who's actually taking the correct line on this, and Labor end up following him. As for this, you know, friend of paedophiles line, I think what this shows, you know, that Labor's big game is character assassination, right? You know, they look for a little chink in somebody's character that they can put a blast through and break them apart. They managed it with Scott Morrison. They're not doing it with Peter Dutton. They have not been able to lay a glove on him really as opposition leader. And now I think this is a sign of desperation. But it's really not going to work. And I think we're in that. You can see Peter Dutton's ratings are rising. Anthony Albanese's are falling. I think the effect this will have will just push people further to support Peter Dutton.
Yeah, I think trying to attack Peter Dutton on the basis of his toughness is like trying to attack Brad Pitt on his looks. You know, it's like, it ain't going to work. Just briefly, you get priority on this one, Amanda. Confirmation coming out from AEMO today that more than a quarter of Australians are finding it hard to pay their power bills. This must be impacting small business drastically.
Massively. They're telling me that they can't handle the supply costs. They can't handle even the gas bills double, electricity bill. And then they obviously have to let go of staff. And if they can't stay open, the customers stop coming and the customers are not already cut back because they can't afford the food. And they blame the small business if it's a hospitality venue. And they're shutting down. And they're like, well, where am I going to go? Then they have to go get educated to get a job. And then it hits the family. And that family's then got that cost. They're actually very stressed, and all things are leading to 2024 being potentially the hardest year for small businesses, and all they're doing is being bombarded with constant legislation changes and taxes and costs, and they're not going to survive.
We'll keep on it here for sure. Thanks for joining us, Amanda and Caleb. Caleb, you'll be back at 10 o'clock, and Nick Cater, I'm still trying to recover from somehow chucking in a popular culture reference about Brad Pitt. I've surprised myself, but that's all the time we've got for the panel. Thanks very much.